You should replace yourself with a system. Prepare the world for a world without yourself. Everybody is replaceable. Even people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. Remember how everyone predicted Apple to fail when Steve Jobs died? Well, it didn't. This of course doesn't mean you can get an exact copy that fulfills the exact same function. In this case, the place of a person just as well as the original one. It just means that if the system was indeed a good one in the first place, the system will outlive its components, because it is something bigger than its components. In our example, the individual people working in and leading a company, sometimes the founders themselves. Remember the saying, the whole is bigger than the sum of its parts? This describes the systematic approach very well. This doesn't mean a system is an ideal and completely indestructible structure that will live from now until time itself ceases to exist. It just means this is what an ideal system would look like. Quote, Wikipedia. System. A system is a group of interacting or interrelated entities that form a unified whole. A system, surrounded and influenced by its environment, is described by its boundaries, structure, and purpose, and expressed in its functioning. Systems are the subjects of study of systems theory. In this regard, everything interacting to form a unified whole is a system. But what we want to focus on right now is not abstract system theory, but rather its application in business, using the systematic or the systemic approach to make something bigger than yourself. Something as independent as possible from its individual components or entities, because every single entity has a certain risk of failure, and even if it doesn't fail entirely, it also could reach a point where it does not function optimally anymore. If all football players of a single team just gave 20% less in each and every game, then the system football team will almost certainly have to deal with a drop in outcome. The same is true for a drop in 1%. A smaller chance of winning is the thing you risk when you rely on individual entities like yourself when it comes to creating something bigger than yourself. People themselves are only single entities and therefore have, just like every other entity, a certain risk of failure. Some people say machines are better, and sometimes they are. When it comes to the tasks, machines actually do better. It's actually not a question that matters in the end of the day, because what matters is what an entity does, meaning what its function within the system is and how well it fulfills this function. To which category this entity belongs isn't and shouldn't be a criterion for choosing a system's component. This would put these single characteristics over the actual function and therefore wouldn't be a criterion that necessarily optimizes the system. It's the thing every system design should strive to do. But now finally, how can you create a system? It starts with this one single question. What if I were gone? Every single question. What would happen to your family, to your friends, to your finances, to your company, to your work? If until now you didn't ever ask yourself this question, now is the time to do so. And if you are done, then we can focus on the things about the situation. This situation, we can change something, making the outcome better. It's not that this unpleasant outcome necessarily is something you want to achieve as soon as possible. It is just that this single question just leads or triggers the questions and problems we actually would have to solve anyway in order to prepare for your exit. Whether this means you would leave the business you built or die in a car accident, therefore also leave the business you built, is again not the question we need to ask. Because this question is only the trigger to get us to a point where we can see everything more clearly. And finally start preparing for this inevitable outcome of you being gone in some way or another. And even if this outcome never comes out, Meaning, you maybe could live till infinity if you could maybe upload yourself into the cloud finally. This doesn't really reduce the probabilities of other variables causing you to be gone in some way. Therefore, we now take a look at what you can do to get rid of yourself in order to prepare or take an infinite vacation for the rest of your life. Or to finally trace your Hawaiian shirt back to its origin or its origins and open up a surf school after you finished your dreadlocks. Again, it doesn't really matter. What matters is to which question and subsequently which actions this problem of you being gone could guide you towards. If you were gone, would your family be provided with money? Would there be enough money for all your kids' education? Would it be something they actively had to understand, like running a 1,000-employee company to sell? Would it mean they would have to manage your 48 properties from now on? Or would they only simply own a cash flow and a system you prior put in place that actually would produce the cash flow? Is there enough money for your funeral? Is your funeral maybe already prepared? All of these are, on the one hand, of course, quite macabre and also personal questions, but on the other hand, nevertheless questions someone has to answer eventually at some point, whether it's with you or without you. And the more it's with you, the more any system is dependent on you and your contribution. Of course, our place in this world is something we like, something we need psychologically, probably as one of our needs in Maslow's hierarchy somewhere. But this doesn't take away our own risk of failure, and this is not in a career sense, but rather in a purely systemic sense. Would be to try to automate your life to the maximum extent and as soon as possible, not because it is a fun hobby to pick up, but rather the necessary preparation for the inevitable. And if not inevitable, then at least still something with a certain probability of becoming reality. This doesn't mean you have to be gone afterwards. You still can do the things the system now also would do for you. It just means you now choose to apply to your work. This means, let's say you are an artist making music. Of course, you could create your music and release it. Or you could try to create a system in which you, as an artist, only have limited functionality, being coming up with ideas and recording them, and receiving an active cash flow, for one as a business, and for two as a private person, a human that requires a constant cash flow in order to fulfill his needs, the needs of the human, in order to continue living. Therefore, your role is first to create this system. It could look like this. As a songwriter, you create and record the songs. You then use another systemic component, a distributor, where you upload your music. If these royalties would be your only source of income, you now had to find a way to distribute your royalties across lifetime and beyond, in order to create a cash flow independent from you, your creative doing. Remember, you could lose your ability to play certain instruments by having a stroke, for example. You could lose your ability to come up with new ideas entirely. You could get Alzheimer's. Anything could happen, and you, for the most part, simply don't know what to do. Could be this. Why not first spread all releases across a period of time that actually creates, effectively, a virtual musician or a copy of you that still releases music, even if you are not producing music anymore? Meaning, you would create a system that still produces output, namely releases music, but without you putting music into it. This first would spread your royalties over time. Second, it would generate activity, an essential part of today's algorithms, determining whether something like music is recommended. As a result, you would create a stream of royalties with a resulting royalties cash flow at any point in time, looking like this. Royalties of released songs plus royalties of constantly released songs. If you, as a person, then decide to take some of this cash flow and put it into other assets like a distributing, exchange-traded fund, fully diversified within the world's economy and therefore effectively averaging the risks of all existing businesses worldwide that are part of this ETF, is again a different question. Of course, this then would also be part of your system to replace yourself, but not part of the music system. This means prepare for the inevitable. Prepare the world for a world without yourself. Something you just could do, not necessarily because it would be something you needed to, but just because it's something you could do, is to get rid of yourself.